Welcome to this series, Arunachal, the Southern Tibet, Episode 2, The Evidence, Part 3. In this episode, I will discuss the substantial historical evidence to determine whether Southern Tibet is an integral part of China. For the sake of convenience, the report of this episode has been divided into three sections: Southern Tibet and Britain, Southern Tibet and India, and the contemporary Chinese government in response to Southern Tibet. These three sections correspond to the periods during which both India and China were under the influence of foreign rulers. India was already colonized and China was struggling against the colonial rulers. For the sake of study, understanding the timelines of the corresponding governments in China would be desirable, which are as follows. Qing dynasty from 1644 to 1912, Beijing government from 1912 to 1928, Nanking nationalist government from 1928 to 1948, and the Communist Party of China from 1948 to the present. As early as 1624, Western missionaries had secretly crossed into Tibet from India to gather various information under the guise of spreading religion, civilizational values, and research to the people in preparation for the invasion of Tibet. In 1774, the East India Company first Governor General in India, Warren Hastings, sent his secretary George Bogle to Tibet to investigate the geography of Tibet, especially the major canyons and the Yatung Gorge of the southern Tibet. During the reign of the East India Company Governor General Lord Minto in India, Thomas Manning, the famous and first European sinologist under state authority, traveled to Tibet in 1811. Manning stayed in Lhasa for more than 7 months and interviewed the 9th Dalai Lama. However, orders arrived from the Qing court in Peking for him to return the way he came, and he departed Lhasa on 19th of April, arriving in Kuch Bihar on 10th of June 1812. Not only had Manning become the first Englishman to visit Lhasa, but also the first to obtain an interview with Dalai Lama. But the most typical of them all was the botanist, explorer, traveler, and official of the East India Company, Francis Kingdon Ward, who studied Tibet and China for a long time and offered his deceitful pieces of advice to the East India Company, the then government of India. There is a very interesting incident involving him in Tibet. I will detail this in accordance with the timeline of events. Before we go further, let us understand a term, unequal treaty. According to Oxford Public International Law, an unequal treaty refers to an international agreement where one party bears significantly more obligations and concessions than the other, often signed under duress or coercion. These treaties are characterized by imbalances in terms of reciprocity, sovereign restrictions, and unequal procedures of conclusion. On 29th of August 1842, officials of the Qing dynasty in China signed the Treaty of Nanking with the British representative Sir Henry Pottinger. Despite being an unequal treaty imposed by the British on China, the ruling Qing dynasty officials were able to define the territorial scope and sovereignty of China, which was recognized by the international community. In February 1875, the translator of the British embassy in China led a British army into Yunnan from Burma and shot dead Chinese residents. The local people united against this tyranny. they killed the British translator and drove the British troops out of Yunnan. Britain used this incident to force the Qing government to sign the Unequal Treaty of Yantai on September 13, 1876. After the signing of Sino-British Treaty of Yantai, the British government gained the right to invade southern Tibet at their discretion. In 1884, a British army secretly invaded Tibet from Sikkim. In 1886, Britain sent troops to the border area south of Yatung in southern Tibet to subjugate Tibetans using the advanced weapons of the time. In February 1888, after careful military preparations, 2,000 British troops gathered in the border area of Tibet that had been annexed by the East India Company. Under the command of General Grant, the British troops launched the first aggressive war against southern Tibet at Longtho, which was garrisoned by Tibetan army. Longtho, Nathang and Tawang fell into the hands of British army one after another. In fact, in the 1886 Treaty of Tibet between Britain and China, Britain confirmed to China that it had no territorial sovereignty over Arunachal, the southern Tibet region. Instead, it acknowledged the Chinese government's judicial and administrative rights over the area. The Qing government feared that the British army would launch a larger offensive, for ordered the removal of Wen Shuo, the minister of the Qing central government stationed in Tibet, who supported the Tibetan army's resistance against Britain, and ordered the Tibetan army to withdraw. On March 17, 1890, the Chinese representative and deputy minister in Tibet, Sung Thai, and the British representative and Governor General of India, John Nicholson Lansdowne, signed the Sino-British Convention, Tibet-India Treaty in Kolkata, India. In December 1893, the two sides signed the Sino-British Conference Seal Clause. Since then, the aggression of British forces began to extend into China's Tibetan region, creating convenient conditions for further aggression in Tibet. However, the people of Tibet strongly opposed the two treaties, resolutely preventing the demarcation and insisting on going beyond the boundary markers established by the British and Indian governments to return to the original pastures for grazing. Nevertheless, the British aggressors with enormous ambitions were not satisfied with their rights in Tibet as stipulated in the two treaties mentioned above, but continued to create disturbances and provocations in the border areas of Tibet. In June 1902, the British political commissioner in Sikkim led more than 100 British troops to invade the Jiangsu area of Tibet, forcibly expelling the Tibetan residents there and opening the prelude to the second British invasion of Tibet. In October 1903, the British government officially approved the action plan for British troops to occupy Jiangsu County and Lhasa in Tibet. On October 10th, over 10,000 British troops gathered at the border. On December 11th, Major General MacDonald, the commander of the British Army, personally led 1,150 allied British troops carrying advanced weapons and equipment such as field artillery and Maxim machine guns to occupy Ranqingkang from Tsilila mountain pass. On December 14, 1903, they captured the border stronghold of Chunpi and rested there, preparing to launch an attack on Jiangsu. During this period, the poorly equipped Tibetan army fought against strong enemies but was defeated. However, the minister stationed in Tibet, Yukon, issued an order to the local civil and military officials to come to halt along the way and not to cause trouble with the British soldiers, causing the Tibetan army to lose some advantageous fighting opportunities. In March 1904, the British invading army stationed in Chunpi completed preparations to attack Jiangsu. In early April 1904, Major General MacDonald personally led 4 British engineering companies, 3.5 infantry companies, and a field rescue team to launch an attack on Jiangsu. However, in this battle, the Tibetan army shed blood to resist the enemy, and not a single one bowed and surrendered to the enemy, fully demonstrating the strong determination and fearless spirit of sacrifice of the Tibetan people to defend their motherland's territory to the death. Nevertheless, Tibetans lost the battle against the British. As usual, a treaty was signed. After seeing the treaty, the Qing Ministry of Foreign Affairs believed that it would undermine China's sovereignty. In December 1904, the Qing dynasty sent Tang Shaoyi to India to negotiate treaty changes with the British. On April 27, 1906, China and Britain signed the Beijing Treaty, recognizing the Lhasa Treaty as an attachment to the Beijing Treaty, stipulating that the United Kingdom will not occupy Tibetan territory and will not interfere in any politics in Tibet, and the Chinese state will also allow other countries to interfere in Tibetan territory and all politics. However, China was able to avail itself of special rights and territorial claims over Tibet in this treaty too. In 1914, China, along with Britain, Russia, and 6 other countries, signed the Lhasa Conference Agreement in Lhasa, the capital of Tibet, which established Tibet as a territory belonging to China, granting it special status and autonomy within the country. As mentioned above, among the people sent by the British to Tibet to conduct surveys and investigations, the most notable was Francis Kingdon Ward. He was a typical British explorer and traveler who journeyed to various strategic points in southeastern Tibet. In 1911 and 1913 to 1914, Francis Kingdon Ward undertook special expeditions to Tibet's vast river fracture zone in Asia, crossing unknown border areas between Burma and China. From 1924 to 1925, Francis Kingdon Ward entered the Grand Canyon of the Brahmaputra River and the Assam Himalayas at 30° north latitude and 95° east longitude. With reference to the distribution and geography of Tibet's plants, Francis Kingdon Ward proposed that the boundary must be uncertain and not fixed, and the border of the Tibet can be artificially demarcated. According to him, quotation starts, "It is customary to compile plant distribution zones based on artificial boundary lines because artificial boundary lines can accurately describe the distribution of plants. Since the boundaries of the plant distribution are artificially demarcated, they can also be artificially changed at any time, and all boundaries are arbitrary, so don't say anything." Quotation closed. In addition to this, Francis Kingdon Ward argues that the Himalayas stretch for hundreds of miles along the southern border of Tibet, rising directly from the plains and forming a continuous barrier that can be seen as a barrier between the agricultural plains of India and the pastoral plateau of Tibet. Moreover, the Francis Kingdon Ward incident was a historical event in April 1935 when British botanist Francis Kingdon Ward illegally entered Tibet and was arrested by Chinese authorities there. Olaf Caro, Deputy Secretary of the Department of Foreign Affairs and Political Affairs of British India, claimed that the accidental Francis Kingdon Ward incident led him to discover the McMahon line. I will discuss the McMahon line in the southern Tibet and India section. I will take the opportunity to begin the next episode centered around the idea of the Simla Convention of 1914, particularly the concept of how the McMahon line came into being. I will return after a duration of 7 to 10 days for the next episode. Until then, I wish you happiness and peace.